the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Imagine you are driving on a massive, critical superhighway. I mean, we aren't just talking about a busy commuter road here. This is the singular route connecting the major manufacturing hubs of the world to the cities that desperately need their goods. You have convoys carrying fuel, medical supplies, raw materials, electronics, you name it.
Yeah, basically the entire global economy just humming along in these lanes.
Right, exactly. Traffic is flowing, business is moving. But then suddenly, an anonymous broadcast goes out over the radio. Someone announces that they might have scattered a handful of invisible spike strips across the lanes in the dark.
Oh, wow. Just a completely blind threat.
Yeah, they won't say where these spike strips are. They just casually mention that they might be out there somewhere. The panic, the sudden standstill, the sheer logistical nightmare that follows, I mean, it is instantaneous.
Well, sure, because the highway doesn't even need to be physically blocked to be completely shut down at that point.
Exactly.
I mean, the mere threat of the obstacle immediately becomes just as disruptive and honestly just as paralyzing as the physical obstacle itself.
Right.
You don't actually need to blow out 1,000 tires to stop traffic. You just need to make every single driver believe their tire could be next. The fear does the work for you.
It really does. Now take that scenario and escalate it. Imagine a massive, heavily armed police force arrives on that highway. They shut the entire route down completely.
A total lockdown.
A total lockdown. And they announce they're going to physically inspect every single inch of the asphalt to remove those invisible spike strips. But they don't stop there. They also announce they are going to pull over any driver who paid a rogue, illegal toll booth operator just to try and sneak through.
That is wild.
It is. And that scenario, that level of utter disruption and high-stakes maneuvering is essentially the geopolitical reality we're diving into today.
It's a perfect way to visualize the sheer scale of what we are looking at. The dynamics of extortion, fear, and just overwhelming enforcement are playing out right now. And not on a highway, but on one of the most critical bodies of water on the planet.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we have a very specific, incredibly high-stakes mission for you. We are unpacking a major, fast-moving geopolitical development regarding the United States and Iran.
Right, and to be clear about our source today, we are looking at a Red State report. It's dated today, April 12th, 2026.
Yeah, and it details a sweeping set of announcements made by Donald Trump on the platform Truth Social. The headline alone is just a total showstopper.
It really is.
It says the United States has announced massive military actions in the Strait of Hormuz to systematically shut down Iranian control of the waterway.
And we are going to use this document as a map to decode the exact military actions being ordered. We want to look at the strategic logic behind them, too. Our goal here is to set aside the political rhetoric. We want to look strictly at the physical reality on the water, the facts presented in the source, and the stated rationale for these moves. We're not taking sides or endorsing viewpoints. We just want to make sure you, the listener, are fully informed on the mechanics of this rapidly unfolding situation.
Because we really need an operational blueprint here. The big picture presented is that the United States is undertaking a series of massive actions in the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking total blockades, mine-clearing operations, and direct interdictions of commercial shipping.
Yeah, and a military maneuver of this magnitude doesn't just happen out of nowhere. We have to trace this back to the fuse that lit it.
Right, so let's get into the immediate catalyst.
Yeah.
The article details a definitive breakdown at the negotiating table.
It does. The article points to an operation dubbed Operation Epic Fury. It frames this as the operational backdrop to a failed diplomatic effort.
Which is a pretty intense name.
Definitely. But the implication is that diplomacy was the final off-ramp. And because that off-ramp wasn't taken, the military operation took immediate precedence.
Okay, let's unpack how those negotiations actually shattered, because the source offers a really fascinating detail here. Trump's post notes that the meeting itself actually went quite well.
Yeah, surprisingly well.
Yeah. It says most points were fundamentally agreed to, but the nuclear issue tanked the entire thing. It's like a high-stakes corporate merger, where both sides agree on the office furniture, they agree on the employee benefits, they even agree on the new company logo.
But the core asset is a total deal breaker.
Exactly. In this case, the nuclear program is that deal breaker. But I have to ask, why does this single issue, the nuclear capability, completely eclipse absolutely everything else on the table, to the point of immediately triggering Operation Epic Fury?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the source material frames the existential nature of a nuclear capability. From the perspective presented in the article, a nuclear program isn't just one bullet point on a list of diplomatic grievances.
Right.
It is the ultimate trump card. It permanently and irreversibly alters the balance of power. I mean, Trump's statement explicitly noted that the U.S. could not allow nuclear power to be in the hands of volatile, difficult, unpredictable people.
Which is a very specific choice of words, unpredictable.
Yes, very deliberate.
Because it implies that standard deterrence, the idea that nations won't use nuclear weapons because they fear mutually assured destruction, simply doesn't apply if you fundamentally believe the other side is unpredictable.
That is exactly the core of the logic presented. If a nation that the U.S. considers completely unpredictable achieves nuclear status, every other agreed-upon diplomatic point becomes entirely moot.
Whether that's trade agreements, border recognition, sanction relief.
All of it. You simply cannot enforce a conventional agreement with a nation that holds a nuclear deterrent. Allowing the nuclear program to remain basically negates the value of any other concession Iran might have made.
So it's an all-or-nothing situation.
It's a binary condition. Either the nuclear program goes, or the entire diplomatic framework collapses under its own weight.
And because that diplomatic table collapsed over the nuclear question, the consequences are now spilling directly into the water. Let's look at the physical reality of what is being ordered in the Strait of Hormuz right now, because the military directives detailed in this article are, frankly, staggering.
They represent a total transformation of global maritime operations. The text outlines a multi-pronged approach that the U.S. Navy is undertaking, and it begins with a complete lockdown.
Yeah, the article quotes Trump stating that, effective immediately, the United States Navy will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz.
Any and all ships. That is massive.
It is. And the stated goal of this total blockade is to clear out mines that Iran has allegedly laid in the waterway. This brings us right back to those invisible spike strips from our highway analogy.
Right, the threat you can't see.
Exactly. The article quotes Trump characterizing Iran's strategy as saying, "There may be a mine out there somewhere." He explicitly labels this tactic as world extortion.
The psychology behind that tactic is fascinating, and the source zeroes right in on it. The U.S. position is that an adversary doesn't need a massive armada to control a global choke point.
They just need the fear.
Exactly. They just need the ambiguous, unverified threat of hidden explosives beneath the surface. By creating that ambiguity, Iran essentially forces the rest of the world to negotiate for safe passage.
Which the U.S. is categorically rejecting here. The stated end goal of the U.S. operation is to reach an environment where it is on an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out basis.
Open access.
Open access. But here is where the strategy gets incredibly aggressive. To get to that open access, they are first locking it all down. And they are adding a massive punitive measure for anyone who played along with the extortion.
This is arguably the most complex and unprecedented military order detailed in the text. It's not just about finding and destroying the mines.
Right.
It's about fundamentally punishing the entities that try to navigate around the threat by paying off the adversary.
This part really caught my eye. The article details a highly specific order instructing the Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran.
Yeah, that is huge.
The quote literally says, "No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas." So before we get into the geopolitics of this, let's break down the physical reality. What does a naval interdiction actually look like in this context?
Well, it's intense.
Are we talking about U.S. Navy helicopters buzzing commercial cargo ships and armed teams boarding them?
In a military context, interdiction means actively intercepting and halting the movement of an entity. On the open water, yes, that often involves a physical show of overwhelming force.
So a heavily armed Navy destroyer approaches a massive, slow-moving commercial cargo ship.
Right. They establish radio contact and order the vessel to stop its engines. If the vessel complies, it might be boarded by armed tactical teams. They inspect the cargo, interrogate the captain, and scrutinize the ship's logs.
And if they don't comply?
If the vessel doesn't comply, the Navy has the capability to disable the ship, physically block its path, or force it to change course. I mean, it is an incredibly tense, high-stakes physical confrontation.
So the U.S. is utilizing a blockade, which inherently stops the flow of traffic, to enforce the ultimate goal of free and open navigation. It is a massive logistical paradox.
It really is.
But I keep getting hung up on the mechanics of this illegal toll enforcement. How exactly does a Navy verify if a commercial ship out on the high seas has paid a toll to a foreign government? Are those boarding parties checking the shipping company's accounting ledgers?
The ambiguity is the weapon here. The text doesn't specify the mechanics of auditing these ships, and that omission is likely intentional.
Oh, interesting. So it's more about the threat.
Exactly. The primary goal of this announcement isn't necessarily to audit every ledger on the high seas. It is to create a massive chilling effect across the entire global shipping industry.
Okay, let's follow that logic. Shipping companies are incredibly pragmatic. Usually, if a local power demands a fee, a toll, to guarantee they won't blow up a $100 million oil tanker, the company will quietly pay it.
Oh, absolutely. They write it off as a cost of doing business.
Right. Just to keep the global supply chain moving and keep their insurance premiums from going through the roof.
But the U.S. policy outlined in this article is attempting to sever that pragmatic dynamic entirely. By threatening to interdict ships that pay the toll, the U.S. is forcing commercial entities into an impossible choice.
Do they risk defying Iran and hitting a mine? Or do they pay Iran and guarantee they get intercepted, boarded, and potentially seized by the United States Navy?
Precisely. The threat of an audit alone is enough to make insurance companies completely rewrite their policies. If an insurance underwriter believes a ship will be seized by the U.S. military because the owner paid a shadow toll, they simply won't insure the voyage.
Wow. It essentially deputizes every commercial vessel into this geopolitical standoff.
It does.
It forces global shipping companies to financially isolate Iran because the cost of paying the toll suddenly becomes higher than the cost of the excursion itself.
It is a brutal, uncompromising position for global trade.
It really is. But this conflict extends far beyond just commercial ships and maritime checkpoints. We need to look at the broader military reality on the ground and the explicit, explosive threats being exchanged in this source.
Yeah, the rhetoric from the source regarding the military confrontation is unambiguous. It is severely escalated. It paints a picture of a conflict that has already moved past the point of warning shots.
The article details a direct, visceral warning. Any Iranian who fires at U.S. forces or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. That's a direct quote.
Very direct.
But then the text makes a series of claims about the current state of the Iranian military that are genuinely jarring. Trump's quote claims that Iran's military is already effectively decimated.
Right, it lists it out explicitly.
Yeah, it says their navy is gone, their air force is gone, their anti-aircraft and radar are useless, and that Khomeini and most of their leaders are dead, all framed as a consequence of their nuclear ambitions.
We have to carefully examine those claims against the rest of the text, because the Red State author, Nick Harama, provides his own tactical analysis that creates a fascinating contrast with that sweeping rhetoric.
How so?
Well, the political statement claims total annihilation of the enemy's command and conventional forces, but the tactical reality on the water, according to the author, is far more nuanced.
Ah, okay. The author notes that U.S. Navy destroyers have already successfully passed through the strait without incident and without permission.
Exactly. So that detail supports the idea that the U.S. is moving freely and dominating the space.
But then, the author immediately pivots. He notes that Iran still possesses a very specific, highly lethal set of threats. They have missiles, they have drones, and crucially, they have small attack boats.
And that pivot highlights the critical distinction between conventional warfare and asymmetric warfare. The political rhetoric claims the conventional military, the heavy navy, the air force, the sophisticated radar networks is gone.
Right, the big stuff.
But the author's tactical analysis acknowledges that Iran's power in a narrow choke point like the Strait of Hormuz doesn't rely on massive destroyers or traditional air forces. It relies on asymmetry.
Meaning a swarm of cheap, fast, small attack boats.
Yeah.
Or a barrage of low-cost, unmanned drones.
Exactly. Those can cause catastrophic damage to massive, expensive commercial tankers or severely harassed, sophisticated naval destroyers.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It sounds like someone declaring total victory over a hornet's nest simply because they knocked the actual nest down out of the tree.
That's a great way to put it.
The physical structure might be completely destroyed. You know, the radar, the traditional navy, the headquarters. But the hornets themselves, the drones, and those small, fast attack boats are still out there swarming.
They are.
So how does the U.S. reconcile the claim that the enemy is decimated with the reality that these asymmetrical threats are still actively guarding the strait?
The strategy presented is essentially trying to smoke out those hornets before they can swarm the blockade. The author reconciles that tension by pointing to preemptive military action.
Okay.
The article notes that the U.S. military had already been softening up the targets along the strait that might have posed a problem.
Softening up. That implies a sustained, highly targeted campaign of strikes designed to degrade those exact asymmetric capabilities, the drone launch pads, the small boat docks, before the blockade was even publicly announced.
Which provides massive context to the final ominous quote from the source, that at the appropriate moment the U.S. is fully locked and loaded, and that the military will finish up the little that is left of Iran.
Finish up the little that is left. It acknowledges that there is something left.
Right, those missiles, those drones, those small boats. But it frames the U.S. posture as overwhelmingly prepared to absorb and completely neutralize whatever asymmetric response Iran attempts to mount.
So the strategy presented is one of overwhelming, undeniable force designed to crush a localized asymmetric defense.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground here today, dissecting an incredibly dense and high-stakes set of claims from this Red State report.
We definitely have.
We've mapped the failure of nuclear diplomacy directly to the logistical paradox of blockading an international strait to ensure free travel. We've looked at the intense physical reality of naval interdictions.
And explored the tension between claiming an enemy is destroyed while preparing for the ongoing threat of their drone swarms.
Right. But I want to bring this all directly back to you, the listener. Why should you care about this deep dive? Why does a military maneuver, a blockade on the other side of the planet, matter to your day-to-day life? Simply because the Strait of Hormuz is not just an arbitrary spot on a map. It is the very definition of a global bottleneck.
Absolutely. A massive percentage of the world's oil and countless tons of commercial goods must physically pass through that narrow strip of water to reach their destinations.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah. Regardless of the political framing, the rhetoric used by any side, or the specific details of Operation Epic Fury, the physical reality of what we've discussed today affects absolutely everything.
Everything from top to bottom.
Military blockades, clearing hidden mines, intercepting commercial shipping, and the hovering threat of asymmetric drone warfare. These actions send shockwaves through the global economy.
Right.
It affects the stability of global markets. It affects the tangled supply chains that stock our grocery shelves. And it most definitely dictates the cost of goods and the price of fuel in your local community. When a global superhighway is shut down, every single driver on the planet feels the traffic jam. They really do. And as we consider the long-term impact of this event, this raises an incredibly important question, a precedent that extends far beyond this single conflict in this single waterway.
What's that?
If a nation can justify mobilizing its military to intercept, board, and interdict commercial, civilian ships in international waters simply because those ships paid a toll to an adversary, effectively treating the payment of extortion as an illegal act worthy of naval intervention, how might other global superpowers use this exact same precedent in other contested waterways around the world?
Man, that is a brilliant and unsettling point to leave on. The rules of the road are being radically rewritten right in front of us, and the invisible spike strips of geopolitics are permanently changing how the entire world navigates. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into an incredibly complex and consequential moment in global affairs. Keep questioning the consensus, keep looking deeply at the forces shaping our world, and we will catch you next time as we dive into the next big story.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground. For freedom, for tradition, in this land we found. We cherish our Constitution, the words that set us free. the dream of a nation shining bright in the night. In every town and village, in every heart and home, we'll uphold our principles, together we'll roam. Through trials and through triumphs, we'll never lose our way, with conservative values leading us day by day. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground for freedom, for tradition in this land we found. So here's to the brave, to the strong, to the free, to the spirit that binds us from sea to shining sea. We'll die